It started with a man who smiled too long on every flight, then a barefoot woman who ran across runways with bloodied feet, and a flight where the seat next to you gets cold, but no one's booked in. These aren't just ghost stories. These are encounters. Airports, control towers, midnight cabins in the sky. Something is following us through metal detectors and boarding gates. They wait in empty seats, crawl up tower stairs, whisper over jet engines. And tonight, they're flying with you. Welcome aboard. This is Basement 13. Pray your name isn't the next one called. Her name was Clara, 24, new to the skies, working as a flight attendant for a small San Diego-based airline. She loved the quiet mornings, the clinking of coffee cups at 30,000 feet, the whispered thank yous from sleepy passengers. Everything was going great until she saw him. Jonathan, mid-30s, neatly dressed, always alone, and always seated where he could see her. At first, Clara chalked it up to coincidence. People took the same routes all the time. But then came the second flight, then the third, then the fifth, always on her flights, always watching. And it wasn't the casual glance most passengers give. Jonathan had a stare like static. It clung to you. She'd feel it on her neck mid-flight service and turn around. There he was, eyes locked, half smiling. Clara tried to ignore it. But then, during a Seattle run, she caught him taking photos of her. His phone pointed directly at her. No shame. When their eyes met, he smiled and calmly turned the screen away. Her chest tightened. By the next flight, she avoided eye contact. But his presence was impossible to ignore. He'd time his trips to the bathroom right as she walked past. He lingered in the galley just a second too long, close enough to brush her elbow but never say a word. He was too careful, never crossing a line that could get him thrown off a plane. Until Portland. After a long day of connections, Clara checked into the downtown Marriott, craving a quiet dinner. As she stepped out for food, she saw him, Jonathan, across the street under a flickering lamp. He didn't move, just watched her, just stood there. Panic kicked in. She took the long way to the cafe, glancing behind her the entire time. And halfway through dinner, he walked in. Didn't speak, didn't sit at her table. Just ordered coffee, turned toward her and sipped. Silent, staring. Clara left her meal untouched and rushed back to her hotel, locking every deadbolt and dragging the desk in front of the door. She couldn't breathe right for hours. But he didn't follow. Not that night. Still, he was in her head now. The stalking got smarter. Clara began finding him always seated near the front, closer to her. He made a show of watching her now. Never threatening. Never talking. Just existing, too close. On a return leg from LA, after everyone else had to board, he leaned close and whispered, "Have a good night. I'll see you soon." Her whole body went cold. That night she filed a report. But what happens when you report a ghost? A man who disappears before anyone else can see him? They checked passenger logs. No violations. No threats. And that's where it gets worse. Because the man who should have been just another customer somehow knew where she lived. And he left a note. The note under Clara's door wasn't handwritten. It was printed. Clean. Precise. One sentence only. "You shouldn't have told anyone." She read it 5 times. Each time, the letters seemed to vibrate harder in her skull. He knew. He knew she reported him. Worse, he knew where she lived. She backed away from the door like it had grown teeth. Her phone slipped in her shaking hands as she called the police. An officer came. Reviewed the lobby cams. No footage of anyone suspicious. No Jonathan. No faces. Just static for the 2 minutes her hallway camera glitched. 2 minutes. Enough to drop a note. Enough to leave a message without a sound. The airline grounded her temporarily. They said it was for her safety. She changed apartments. Changed her number. Cut social media. Anything that could be tracked. For weeks there was silence. Until she received the second note. Slipped through the mail slot this time, even though her new building didn't have one. This note was different. Messy. Rush. Like someone had punched it out on a typewriter in the middle of a seizure. "You moved. I don't like that." This time, Clara didn't hesitate. She got a restraining order filed, even though she still had no legal proof of Jonathan's wrongdoing. No assault. No threats. Just paper-thin terror stacking up like bones under her floorboards. But then came the flight. It was her first one back since the stalking incident. A short hop to Portland. Clara checked the manifest. No Jonathan. She let herself breathe. Until midair. She was prepping coffee in the galley when she heard someone whistle. A soft, slow melody. One she'd heard before, in the cafe. Jonathan's whistle. She spun around, no one there. Passengers were sleeping. Reading. Ignoring her. The cabin felt too quiet. That's when she saw it. Row 8. See. A wool coat. A black glove resting on the armrest. The seat was booked. She knew the name on that ticket wasn't his. But somehow it was him. She couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Her body screamed to do something, anything. But her legs felt full of sand. That's when he turned and smiled. But this smile wasn't empty. It was cruel. Confident. Like he had already won. He leaned forward and whispered something Clara couldn't hear, but she felt it. Like a worm crawling behind her eardrum. She stumbled into the cockpit and locked the door behind her. The pilot turned, alarmed. Clara didn't speak. Just shook. They landed. Authorities boarded. But the man was gone. The seat empty. The coat missing. The glove never found. No witness remembered him boarding. No ID matched. The cameras glitched. Again. Clara broke down. She took a leave of absence, handed in her badge, and left the skies behind. But the nightmare was still flying. Because a week later her new phone, her new unlisted number, buzzed once. No caller ID. One voicemail. Just breathing. What? Close. And then. Wrong seat, Clara. Now let's cover story 2. It was 11:47 p.m. when Helen boarded United Flight 1658 from San Francisco to Miami. Row 14. Seat B aisle. She was 69, walking with a cane, and grateful the window seat beside her, 14A, was showing empty on the manifest. The middle of the night. An empty seat. A rare gift. Until he arrived. No ticket. No bag. No smile. Just a tall man in a wool coat, scarf covering half his face, slipping into 14A like he belonged there. Helen assumed it was a late upgrade. Maybe standby. But something was off. He never moved. Never adjusted his seatbelt, because it was already fastened. His gloves were black, too shiny as if they were wet. Not damp. Slick. His coat looked heavy, but it didn't smell like wool. It smelled like soil. Like something pulled from a fresh grave. When the beverage cart rolled by, Helen asked for ginger ale. The attendant smiled, asked the man, "Anything for you, sir?" Nothing. Not a nod. Not a blink. A bottle of water was placed on his tray anyway. He never touched it. 3 hours into the flight, Helen woke from a shallow nap to feel pressure against her right arm. The man was leaning into her. Not dramatically, but enough. Steady. Unmoving. His sleeve pressed against hers, cold and damp like fog off the bay. She turned, whispered, "Sir, could you give me a little space?" No answer. No breath. She couldn't even hear him breathe. She pressed the call button. It didn't light up. She needed air. She rose, walked toward the lavatory at the back of the plane. She turned once, looked back down the aisle. 14A was empty. Vacant. The seat where she had felt that coat. That weight. That presence was now just a headrest catching the blue overhead light. No coat. No scarf. No gloves. No man. She blinked. When she returned, the man was sitting there again. As if he'd never left. She wanted to scream, but who would believe her? When the plane began to descend, passengers unbuckled, gathered their bags, laughed quietly about vacation plans. The man never moved. Even as Helen struggled to rise and shuffle past him with her cane, he didn't budge. She turned back one last time, touched his coat, trying to say goodbye. It was ice cold. Colder than the window. Colder than the sky. At the gate, the attendant stopped her. "Ma'am, did you say someone was sitting next to you?" "Yes, a tall man. Gray scarf. Wool coat." The attendant paled. There was no one in 14A. The seat wasn't booked. They showed her the manifest. 14A, vacant. She pulled out her phone. Opened the photo she'd taken at boarding. Row 14. Only one seat filled. Hers. She remembers the scent. The sound of his silence. The static chill in his sleeve. And that untouched bottle of water. It was never taken. But somehow it was gone. Now let's cover story 3. March 4th. Snow still clung to the edges of the Iowa fields like frostbitten bones. But inside the air traffic control tower in Atlantic, it was quiet. Almost peaceful. Until the radio crackled. A freight carrier needed an emergency landing. Engine failure, light smoke coming in fast. My uncle was ready. He cleared the strip, checked the winds, gave final approach instructions. Then she came back. Not walking this time. Crawling. Up the outside stairs. He heard the first clang. Bare feet on metal. Then another. Louder. Faster. One after another, like a heartbeat, getting closer, faster, sharper. Clang. 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 He stared at the ceiling hatch. It was sealed. But he knew she was just beyond it. One more step and she'd be in the tower again. He tried to breathe, tried to call the freight pilot. His voice cracked, raspy with terror. He didn't want to look. He couldn't. But his eyes disobeyed. They locked on the hatch. It creaked. Pried open like a wound. Wind whooshed in, but it was warm outside. The cold wasn't from the air. It was from her. First her hands. Blue-skinned, like something that had drowned in ice. Then her head. Tilted. Lips pale and split, eyes still stretched wider than nature allowed. They never blinked. Not once. Not ever. She crawled in like a spider made of rotten bone. Stood tall. Her toenails were black with dried blood. Each step she took left a small, perfect circle of red. But she didn't look at the radar, or the flashing lights, or the plane. She only looked at him. He whispered into the mic, barely able to speak, clearing the freight carrier to land. She stepped closer. Closer. She stopped 3 feet from him. He could smell her breath. It smelled like dirt and mold and wet copper. Her lips parted. Come down to the field. Her voice wasn't loud. It vibrated. Like it didn't come from her lungs, but from inside the tower itself. She turned suddenly, walked to the opposite window, her heel cutting on broken glass, leaking blood like ink, and stepped out. Just like that. No scream. No impact. Just gone. My uncle collapsed to his knees. The tower stayed silent, for 1 second. Then came the freight carrier's wheels slamming onto the runway, rattling the glass. But the ground crew didn't cheer. Didn't respond. They were staring at the tarmac. At her. She was standing on the edge of the field. Again. Same ripped dress. Same bloody feet. No one saw her climb back. Because maybe she never left. That night, police found no body. No footprints leading away. Only one trail, from the tower to the window. And inside, a dozen small circles of blood that no chemical ever fully cleaned. When my uncle retired 6 months later, the stains still bled through every coat of paint. They never found Jonathan. They never found her body. They never found a single frame showing 14A was ever filled. But blood doesn't lie. And neither do the ones who survived long enough to tell the tale. If these stories chilled you, don't get too comfortable. Because next week, we descend into a chapel where the walls bleed. And the congregation never leaves, not alive. Subscribe only if you dare. And don't forget to check behind you before you click that bell. We drop nightmares every week. This is Basement 13. Where you don't watch horror. You live it.